good morning, evening, or night. Wherever you are, welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Friday, 4th July, 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. The U.S. is navigating complex domestic and international landscapes. A U.S. judge authorized the deportation of 8 immigrants to South Sudan, alongside nationals from Vietnam, South Korea, Mexico, Laos, Cuba, and Myanmar. This decision follows concerns that Donald Trump's spending bill could accelerate deportations. The U.S. Supreme Court has twice upheld Trump's ability to deport foreign nationals to countries outside their own. The passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which increases spending on border security and defense while making the 2017 tax cuts permanent, has sparked concerns about the U.S.'s long-term debt and the reliability of the U.S. dollar. In the Philippines, the USS George Washington's visit to Manila signals renewed U.S. commitment amidst activity in the South China Sea, with Captain Timothy Waits emphasizing freedom of navigation. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Vietnam have reached a trade deal imposing a 20% tariff on Vietnamese goods, a reduction from the previously threatened 46%, though a clause may impact Asian supply chains. NATO's 32 members have committed to increasing defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2035, aiming to dissuade Donald Trump from withdrawing the U.S. from transatlantic security, potentially raising defense spending from $1.50 trillion to around $4.20 trillion over the next 10 years. Domestically, a U.S. study revealed that sewage, sludge, and wastewater treatment plants are major sources of fast water pollution, with concerning levels found around nearly all tested sites. Flash floods in Texas Hill Country resulted in at least 24 deaths, and 23 girl campers are missing. Donald Trump denied knowingly using an anti-Semitic term at an Iowa rally and announced plans to hold a UFC fight at the White House for the country's 250th anniversary. Shifting to Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky announced that the U.S. and Ukraine will collaborate to strengthen air defenses following a conversation with Trump. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stated that Russia would continue its war on Ukraine, citing a failure to achieve its goals through diplomatic means. Regarding Israel-Gaza, Hamas responded in a positive spirit to a U.S.-brokered Gaza ceasefire proposal, expressing readiness to negotiate a deal that includes hostage release and conflict resolution talks, potentially leading to a 60-day ceasefire. Donald Trump announced the proposal for a 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Israeli airstrikes, however, reportedly killed 15 Palestinians, while 20 others died waiting for aid, according to the Associated Press, with NASA hospital reporting deaths near Rafah distribution sites, and among those awaiting supplies in southern Gaza. Israel has not responded publicly to the proposal. In Australia, Creative Australia CEO Adrian Collette faces resignation pressure after reinstating Khaled Sabi as Australia's 2026 Venice Biennale representative, drawing criticism from senior arts figures. In Sydney, police discovered the decomposing bodies of 2 men in a house after a welfare concern call. Their roommate may have been unaware of their deaths for weeks. Police are also investigating an arson attack on a Melbourne synagogue, one in a surge of anti-Jewish acts in Australia, where a man attempted to set fire to the Adas Israel synagogue. China's ambassador to Canberra advised Australia not to be incited by NATO support for US demands to increase defense spending, suggesting cooperation with Beijing to resolve regional disputes. The deportation of 8 immigrants by a U.S. judge has placed focus on South Sudan. Migrants in US detention lost an appeal against deportation to South Sudan. Returning to Vietnam, the U.S. and Vietnam reached a trade deal imposing a 20% tariff on Vietnamese goods, lower than the previously threatened 46%. Although a clause in the agreement is expected to impact Asia's supply chains. Focusing on China, the Chinese ambassador to Canberra advised Australia not to be incited by NATO's support for us. Demands to increase defense spending, suggesting cooperation with Beijing to resolve regional disputes. Chinese scholar Wu Jinbo suggests Donald Trump's stance on Taiwan will be crucial for a potential summit with Xi Jinping in Beijing, stating Trump should clearly indicate that the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence. Observers warn that the USS George Washington's visit to Manila could be interpreted by China as containment. Finally, UNAIDS Executive Director Winnie Byanyima anticipates a rise in HIV rates and deaths due to US aid cuts, projecting an additional 6 million HIV infections and 4 million AIDS-related deaths by 2029 if the funding permanently disappears. Byanyima considered resigning when Donald Trump canceled TEPFR funding. China is grappling with a mix of economic uncertainties and strategic international engagement. As the economy faces challenges, fortune-telling bars are becoming increasingly popular, offering spiritual guidance rooted in Taoist, Buddhist, and folk traditions. In the realm of trade, China has imposed anti-dumping duties of up to 34.9% on European brandy, especially cognac from France, for 5 years, a response to EU restrictions on Chinese medical equipment firms. During his European tour, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi addressed EU concerns about rare earth export restrictions, assuring that European companies meeting application procedures will have their needs met, emphasizing China's sovereign right to control dual-use goods. Geopolitically, China has cautioned India against interfering in Tibetan affairs, asserting its right to approve the Dalai Lama's successor, citing historical precedent. China has urged India to cease using Tibet-related issues to interfere in its internal affairs, reiterating its position on the succession of the Dalai Lama, following remarks from a senior Indian minister. According to sources, China has also told the EU it does not want Russia to lose the war in Ukraine, fearing the US would then focus entirely on Beijing. Economically, China is encouraging both caution and rapid development in assisted driving technology, viewing it as a key competitive area in the automotive market. Despite past concerns about Washington's Treasury holdings, China is not publicly criticizing Trump's costly bill, which is expected to increase the U.S. national debt. China is also grappling with the environmental consequences of its rare earth dominance, including contaminated sludge and groundwater posing health threats. The artificial lake of sludge is contaminated with lead, cadmium, heavy metals, and traces of radioactive thorium. China's dominance in rare earth production stems from low environmental standards and a focus on industry support, exemplified by the Bayan Obo mine in Inner Mongolia, China. Limited consolidation is occurring in China's semiconductor industry due to officials' reluctance to record losses on state-owned assets during M&A. Robert Pape, a professor at the University of Chicago, suggests China could use its advanced manufacturing innovation to improve business ties with the U.S., potentially leading to China peacefully rising as the world's leading superpower. Domestically, China has announced supportive policies for the medical development of brain-computer interfaces, BCI. The National Medical Products Administration will introduce supportive policies for BCI-based medical devices. New images of China's J-20A stealth fighter have surfaced on Chinese social media, suggesting it is rehearsing for a potential debut at a September military parade alongside photos of the J-35 fighter. Excavations in southwest China have uncovered wooden tools dating back 300,000 years ago, providing the first evidence of a wood age in East Asia, suggesting that wooden tools were widely used by early humans in the region. Turning to the United States, Donald Trump mentioned the potential for a Gaza ceasefire deal by next week during a discussion aboard Air Force One. He also discussed sanctions with Putin and a potential TikTok deal with China. BRICS nations are set to denounce Donald Trump's tariffs. While China's Xi Jinping and Russia's Vladimir Putin are opting to stay away, Putin will participate via video link. In South Korea, a North Korean man crossed the heavily fortified demilitarized zone, an unusual defection route as most escape through China. Finally, in Europe, hopes are rising for recovery in the manufacturing sector, particularly in Germany, but challenges persist. A key indicator, Germany's Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, surged to a 34-month high, but still remained below 50, indicating a contraction. Ukraine endured a barrage of Russian missile and drone strikes on Kyiv, marking the most intense aerial assault since the conflict's onset, with Russia launching 550 drones and missiles. Ukrainian air defenses reported intercepting 270 targets and losing 208 targets from radar, which they suspect were jammed. President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attacks as acts of terror, especially after a record-breaking drone and ballistic missile attack on Kyiv, shortly after a phone call between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, who Trump felt humiliated by. Despite increasing inclusivity, Ukraine does not provide legal equality for its LGBTQ soldiers, who make up approximately 10% of the armed forces. Russia targeted Ukrainian urban centers with drone and missile strikes and simultaneously claimed to have intercepted numerous Ukrainian drones, including 2 in close proximity to St. Petersburg. Dutch intelligence reveals Russia has escalated its use of prohibited chemical agents, such as chloropicrin, a poisonous gas dating back to World War I, in Ukraine. The United States has temporarily suspended a military aid shipment to Ukraine due to its own resource constraints. Although described as an isolated incident, the suspension has heightened concerns in Ukraine and among its European allies amid a strained U.S.-Ukraine relationship. President Donald Trump voiced his dissatisfaction with Vladimir Putin after a phone conversation failed to advance peace efforts in Ukraine, stating he didn't make any progress with Putin and that the call resulted in no progress on a Ukraine ceasefire. Trump is reportedly disheartened by Putin's unwillingness to make concessions. In the United Kingdom, the High Court dismissed an appeal seeking to overturn the government's designation of Palestine Action, an activist organization, as a terrorist organization. London courts upheld the UK's ban on Palestine Action, which critics say equates anti-Gaza war protesters with groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIL. Israel is nearing a potential ceasefire agreement with Hamas, a development that could strengthen Prime Minister Netanyahu's position amid ongoing conflict. Donald Trump believes Hamas will accept a deal Israel has already approved, possibly leading to an announcement after Netanyahu's visit to Washington. Hamas has signaled its willingness to restart truce talks, emphasizing the need for guarantees that the latest proposal will permanently end the Gaza war. While Hamas's specific demands regarding the 60-day truce, hostage exchanges, and future negotiations remain uncertain. The group is expected to insist on a complete cessation of hostilities before releasing all hostages, with the permanence of any ceasefire agreement being the primary obstacle. In Gaza, the humanitarian situation remains dire, as the UN has recorded 613 deaths near humanitarian convoys and aid distribution points run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. One spokesperson, Ravina Shamdasani, indicated evidence suggesting that the Israeli military has shelled and shot at Palestinians attempting to access these aid points. Adding to the crisis, the family of Dr. Marwan al-Sultan, director of Gaza's Indonesian hospital, suspects he was intentionally targeted in an Israeli airstrike that killed his wife, daughter, sister, and son-in-law. Meanwhile, in the West Bank, an increasing number of Palestinian Bedouin families are fleeing due to heightened violence, assaults, and harassment by Israeli settlers and forces since the beginning of the Gaza war. Turning to the United States, the House of Representatives has approved Donald Trump's tax and spending bill, which includes substantial funding for deportation initiatives. The legislation is projected to reduce Medicaid and food stamps benefits for millions and is expected to increase the national deficit by $3.30 trillion. Japan is navigating a multifaceted landscape of seismic activity, economic shifts, and political maneuvering. Following a 5.5 magnitude earthquake, residents were evacuated from remote islands, raising concerns about potential aftershocks. Economically, household spending in Japan saw a 4.7% real increase in May, marking the first rise in 2 months and the largest since August 2022. Inflation continues to outpace the Bank of Japan's BOJ forecasts, hinting at a possible future interest rate hike. As party leaders campaign for the upper house election, inflation and rice shortages have become focal points. Overseas voting has already begun, including for Japanese citizens living in Taiwan. A notable point is that less than 30% of the upper house election candidates are women, even with a law in place promoting gender equality in politics. Sohei Kamiya, the leader of the Sansito Party, has sparked controversy with comments about childbirth ahead of the election. International trade negotiations between Japan and the US have reached a standstill, making a deal before the deadline seem improbable. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba has disputed President Donald Trump's claim that Japan doesn't import U.S. rice, insisting on a correction. U.S.-branded car sales remained low in Japan, only accounting for 7.8% of imported cars sold between January and June. The stalled negotiations and escalating trade threats from the U.S. are causing increasing frustration among Japanese policymakers and the public, especially as the 90-day pause on steep U.S. tariffs is nearing its end. Companies receiving government aid will be required to raise funds from the private sector and grant the government a golden share, along with certain voting rights. Japan Asset Management Platform has launched a new white-label service designed to simplify the creation of ETFs in Japan. Turning to France, Shintaro Awa has been named the new head chef of Ambroisie in Paris, taking over from Bernard Pacor, who served in that role for nearly 45 years. South Korea experienced a border crossing by a North Korean individual. The person crossed the military demarcation line. South Korean authorities took the individual into custody. They are investigating the crossing, including potential defection. The capital region is battling a lovebug infestation. Municipal workers are spraying water to control the swarm. Residents seek stronger solutions. In Daegu, officials removed 80 tons of garbage from a family home. The residents received psychological treatment. The cleanup took 3 days. South Korea and Japan aim to benefit from U.S. efforts to curb China's shipbuilding dominance. South Korea's President, Lee Jae-myung, supports the shipbuilding industry. He considers it to be in major crisis. India is working towards a trade agreement with the United States, with Trade Minister Piyush Goyal emphasizing the protection of India's national interests before the July 9 White House deadline. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has guaranteed continued trade and investment with Trinidad and Tobago during a recent parliamentary speech. In Himachal Pradesh, severe rainfall has led to 37 deaths linked to the weather and 26 from road accidents, with forecasts predicting continued rain until July 7. A foreign remittance tax affecting Indians in the US has been finalized at 1%, included in the One Big Beautiful Bill, after initial proposals suggested a 5% rate. A British F-35B fighter jet is still grounded at an airport in southern India because of mechanical issues, which has caught the attention of social media and the local tourism board. Turning to China, the nation is leveraging events like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization SCO defense meeting to push its vision of a multipolar global order that strengthens the global south, and it is increasingly depending on these gatherings for broader diplomatic initiatives. Vietnam is seeking U.S. funding to support innovative DNA analysis aimed at identifying Vietnamese soldiers missing in action, MIAs, from the Vietnam War. These soldiers are buried in cemeteries such as Tra Linh Cemetery in northern Vietnam. Researchers from the Center for DNA Identification at the Institute of Biotechnology of the Vietnam Academy of Science and Technology are processing bone samples. They are utilizing emerging DNA analysis methods to improve the identification of highly degraded human remains. The efforts to identify Vietnamese war dead are occurring as USAID considers defunding the program. Iran faces heightened international scrutiny as tensions escalate around its nuclear program. The UN nuclear watchdog has withdrawn its inspectors after cooperation with the IAEA ended. This move raises fears that Iran might pursue nuclear weapons development, especially under pressure from potential Israeli and US strikes. European nations are concerned about Donald Trump's commitment to stabilizing Iran after his stated objective of ending Tehran's nuclear program. They seek to reassert their influence in the crisis. Kaja Kallas has offered to facilitate negotiations and urged Iran not to exclude UN weapons inspectors. Despite campaigning on avoiding foreign wars, Donald Trump decided to directly aid Israel with American bombs in Iran. In Pakistan, a 5-story building collapsed in Karachi's Layari neighborhood, claiming at least 7 lives. The building, constructed in 1974, was already listed as dilapidated, and rescue operations continue. Simultaneously, the Pakistani army reported killing around 30 militants who allegedly attempted to cross the border from Afghanistan, a week after a suicide attack killed 16 soldiers. The military accused India of backing these militants, claiming their affiliation with the Pakistan Taliban. Despite the prohibition of alcohol for Muslims, Pakistan's leading brewery is showing financial strength and is expanding into soft drink production. In Germany, a controversial plan to deport Afghan nationals directly, orchestrated by Interior Minister Alexander Dobrindt, has drawn sharp criticism from the United Nations. Simultaneously, the Labour Ministry announced that the nation needs roughly 400,000 new skilled workers annually to meet future economic demands. This has led to initiatives designed to attract and integrate skilled migrants into the German workforce. Greece is currently battling multiple wildfires, one of which is raging in Ierapetra on the island of Crete, a major tourist hub. The Cretan fire prompted the evacuation of more than 1,500 individuals, mostly tourists, raising anxieties among Greek citizens who rely heavily on tourism revenue. Additionally, another new wildfire has triggered evacuations in coastal regions south of Athens. Adding to regional woes, Turkey is struggling to contain a severe wildfire that is rapidly spreading across forested hillsides in the western part of the nation. In the Philippines, a state of emergency has been declared in Manila by Mayor Francisco Damagoso due to widespread uncollected garbage. Adding to tensions, Commodore J. Tariela of the Philippine Coast Guard filed a cyber libel case against Sas Rogando Sasot, a pro-Beijing influencer. Meanwhile, Philippine legislators are again attempting to legalize divorce, a bill likely to face strong resistance in the largely Catholic nation. Malaysia's new tax on imported luxury goods a measure introduced by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim to increase government revenue, is affecting the middle class more than intended. Fashion designer Jovian Mondauji, previously connected to former Prime Minister Ismail Sabri Yaqub, has been declared bankrupt due to an unpaid $25 million loan. Adding to the country's challenges, the aerotrain at Kuala Lumpur International Airport, CLIA, faced 2 service disruptions soon after its $100 million relaunch and a test ride by Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim. Myanmar faced renewed scrutiny from the United Nations, leading to the release of 93 child soldiers by the ruling junta. Despite this action, the preceding year saw a concerning trend, with the military and associated armed groups recruiting 467 boys and 15 girls, a significant number of whom were deployed in combat situations. Meanwhile, in China, a disturbing trend of job scams has come to light after a Chinese model from Guangdong province was rescued from Myanmar. The model was lured with the promise of a high-paying job, only to find herself in a dangerous situation. Prompt action by the Chinese embassy in Thailand ensured her safe return, and the embassy subsequently issued a public warning to Chinese citizens, cautioning them against accepting seemingly lucrative job offers from overseas that could potentially be fraudulent and exploitative. Syria is battling intense wildfires along its coastal regions, a crisis worsened by the most severe drought the country has experienced in decades. Complicating the response are the numerous landmines and unexploded ordnance scattered throughout the affected areas, lingering dangers from the protracted civil conflict. Netherlands saw its parliament approve legislation designed to tighten restrictions on asylum seekers aiming to reside in the country. The debated bills have sparked worries, with critics suggesting they may lead to the criminalization of empathy towards migrants lacking proper documentation. Simultaneously, physicist André Geim, a Nobel laureate, experienced the revocation of his Dutch citizenship following his acquisition of British citizenship, a move necessary for him to accept a knight. The United States anticipates a pivotal decision from Hamas within the next 24 hours regarding what President Trump has characterized as a final peace proposal. Trump also indicated ongoing discussions about broadening the Abraham Accords, potentially incorporating Saudi Arabia into the agreement. Mexico is seeing turbulence as boxer Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was apprehended by U.S. immigration officials, potentially leading to his deportation. Authorities claim he has links to a Mexican cartel. Meanwhile, in Mexico City, a demonstration involving hundreds of people protesting gentrification and over-tourism turned violent as a small faction damaged properties and accosted tourists. Singapore is in the news as Zhang Yip-Seng's memoir recounts Lee Kuan Yew's 1976 China visit, revealing his quiet resistance to Chinese influence on Singaporean identity, an event witnessed by S.R. Nathan. Furthermore, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, has finalized its response to the S3 billion money laundering scandal, levying fines of $27.45 million on 9 financial institutions, such as UBS and WHAM, for regulation violations. Argentina is currently hosting Prime Minister Modi for a 2-day visit. Discussions with President Javier Milei will center on fortifying bilateral cooperation. Key sectors for collaboration include agriculture and critical minerals, energy, trade, tourism, technology, and investment are also high on the agenda. Pope Francis is set to revive the tradition of papal summers in Castel Gandolfo, marking a return to the historic practice after a prolonged hiatus. The town, which hosted popes for summer retreats for 4 centuries, is anticipating a boost from the Pope's presence, with local businesses expressing optimism about the renewed interest and activity. El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele refuted allegations that Kilma Abrego Garcia, accused of human smuggling, was abused in prison. Bukele specifically denied claims by Garcia's lawyers of torture and sleep deprivation before his return to the United States. In another matter, an El Salvadorian court convicted 3 former military officers for the 1982 murders of 4 Dutch journalists during the country's civil war, addressing historical accountability. Moldova is set to host top EU officials in Chisinau for a bilateral summit, a landmark event designed to strengthen ties between the EU and the aspiring member state. The summit, the first of its kind between the 2 entities, precedes Moldova's upcoming parliamentary election. Chisinau hopes to capitalize on the high-level meeting to expedite its EU membership application, despite existing debates within the EU about the accession process of other candidate countries. Amidst global economic shifts, Asian markets have shown a mixed response as the July 9 tariff deadline set by President Trump approaches, even as U.S. stocks hit record highs. Societe Generale predicts that nations apprehensive about their $62 trillion holdings in dollar-denominated assets because of the Trump administration's reciprocal tariffs will likely diversify into Asian markets, thereby accelerating de-dollarization. Romania experienced a surge in electricity demand in Bucharest due to extreme heat, as residents heavily relied on air conditioning. Water mist machines were deployed in public spaces to offer relief from the high temperatures. Brazil is celebrating a new visa-free agreement with China, allowing stays of up to 30 days in a move designed to boost international tourism. Mournfully, a Brazilian hiker who tragically fell from Mount Rinjani in Indonesia was laid to rest in Rio de Janeiro. Shifting to sports, Fluminense of Brazil secured a spot in the Club World Cup semi-finals after a 2-1 victory over Al Hilal of Saudi Arabia. Taiwan is retiring its Vietnam-era F-5 fighter jets after decades of service, signaling a transition to more advanced military hardware. Meanwhile, the administration of Taiwanese leader William Lai Ching-te faces controversy regarding its approach to the Republic of China's Rock Wartime legacy, particularly as Taiwan commemorates the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II. The debate focuses on how Taiwan should reconcile its current identity with the historical narrative of the ROC, which governed mainland China before 1949. The government's approach to historical commemoration has drawn criticism from opposition parties and some veterans groups. Thailand is currently experiencing political turbulence following the suspension of Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra. This action has ignited widespread discussion regarding the Constitutional Court's expanding influence and its potential impact on Thailand's democratic foundations. A growing number of observers express apprehension about possible judicial overreach that could destabilize the existing distribution of authority. Indonesian authorities are currently engaged in a large-scale search and rescue operation. This follows the sinking of a ferry near Bali. 30 people remain missing. Navy ships and helicopters are involved in the search. Rescuers are challenged by strong currents. The search restarted around 35 hours after the ferry sank. Amidst rising trade tensions, the United States, under Donald Trump, has threatened to impose 17% tariffs on European food and farm produce exports. This move could significantly affect products like Belgian chocolate, Kerrygold butter from Ireland, and olive oil originating from Italy, Spain, and France. In response, the European Union has signaled its willingness to engage in a potential trade war. Afghanistan sees Russia as the first nation to officially acknowledge the Taliban government since their resurgence in 2021, a move that follows Russia's removal of the Taliban from its list of proscribed organizations. France is experiencing significant air travel disruptions due to an air traffic controller strike. President Macron is suggesting an associated state status, with a strong link with France for New Caledonia's governance future. The fashion company Shine has been fined by French authorities. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Trudeau announced new measures to support the automotive industry, aiming to boost electric vehicle production. Canada is also facing increasing pressure from international partners to increase its defense spending to meet NATO targets. The Canadian government is currently grappling with ongoing negotiations with public sector unions regarding wage increases and working conditions. Shifting focus to the United Kingdom, the government is facing scrutiny over rising inflation rates, prompting debate on potential fiscal policy adjustments. Prime Minister Sunak is scheduled to meet with EU leaders to discuss post-Brexit trade agreements. The UK is also preparing for upcoming local elections, which are seen as a key indicator of public sentiment. In Germany, Chancellor Scholz is working to address concerns over energy security. Amidst ongoing geopolitical tension, Germany's economy is showing signs of slowing down, leading to discussions about potential stimulus measures. The German government is also implementing new regulations regarding immigration and asylum procedures. Eritrea's attempt to end the UN human rights investigation into the country was rejected by the UN Human Rights Council. Human Rights Watch asserted that Asmara aimed to distract from independent reporting on its poor human rights record. In the United States, Alpha and Omega Semiconductor Limited, a California-based company, was fined $4.25 million for illegally shipping power chips and modules to Hawaii Technologies Company Limited in violation of export controls. 8 migrants' effort to halt their deportation to South Sudan by the Trump administration failed after a judge denied a request to block their removal from Djibouti. New Zealand experienced a disruption as Air New Zealand flight NSTO from Auckland to New York was diverted to Washington Dulles International Airport due to thunderstorms and air traffic constraints, leading to cancellations for other passengers. During a visit to Trinidad and Tobago, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi received the nation's highest civilian honor and committed to strengthening the economic partnership between the two countries. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame expressed doubts about the longevity of the U.S.-brokered peace deal with the Democratic Republic of Congo and cautioned that he would retaliate against provocations. Zimbabwe is seeing thousands of informal workers in Harare collecting scrap metal from illegal dump sites to survive, which is inadvertently contributing to climate change mitigation. Turkey is facing scrutiny as the government is imposing severe restrictions on the freedom of LGBTQ people, including bans, arrests, and blocked websites. The Czech Republic experienced a temporary power outage that affected parts of Prague and other areas, causing disruptions to public transport and trains. Kenya is seeing renewed protests against police brutality that are challenging law enforcement's impunity. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.